doctor asked me, like, we're going to run some tests. We're obviously very concerned about you. Is there anything that we can find in your system? And my parents were there, and I listed off every drug that you could think of when it comes to the party world. And I saw the life crumble out of my parents, and I really was like, oh wow, like I'm this far gone.
All right, and welcome back to the Team Look Fit Roundtable. I'm your host, Laurin, and this week I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing my great friend, amazing business owner. Hold on. This is me. I've done like almost 500 podcasts and I still do this. Like literally, I always mess up the intro, and everybody hates me for it.
I mean, I've seen the bloopers of Andy still doing his.
Oh my god, yeah, but like mine are just really bad. Okay. Welcome back to the Team Look Fit Roundtable. I'm your host, Laurin. This week, I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing my good friend and amazing just business owner and person, Joe Sheehey. I'm actually in Denver right now at CURED headquarters. So excited we got to do this and actually wow, I made this like a business trip. We didn't just fuck off the whole time. So we were able to get something really good. So give everybody a little bit of background on you, your story, CURED. And then what we're going to talk about today is something that is very, very interesting. And you're somebody who I really look up to in this area with like mindfulness and meditation. And it's really changed your life.
Absolutely.
And the trajectory of this company. So a little bit of background first.
Yeah, definitely. A little bit of background. I haven't been on the Loco Fit podcast. I know we podcasted in Florida several years ago, right at like the beginning of CURED.
Yeah.
Was that?
That was for Redefine Healthy, yeah.
With Paul, okay.
That was like, I think that was 2018, because I was competing.
Yeah,
to visit.
Yeah, so that, 2018, 3 years ago, CURED was started in 2017, September of 2017, so we just turned 4 years old about a month ago.
I remember at the Olympia with the spices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
OG stuff, yeah.
Wow, yeah, you were literally one of like the first users, one of the first people to like hold a CURED product in your hand. Yeah, holy shit. You introduced me to Chris Bell.
Yeah, because we were at the Central booth.
Yeah.
Dude, it's so
that's wild. So CURED has evolved heavily since those days. We started off as a company that we were focused on bringing cannabinoids to the fitness industry and really shifting the perspective around plants that have carried a stigma around them. And it started specifically around with the utilization of CBD, which is one cannabinoid out of several, over 100 in the cannabis plant. And we were putting CBD in spice jars, and spice for like your food, not spice like the knockoff marijuana that people smoke. That stuff's really bad for you.
Okay, yeah,
spices for your food, because how we really got connected in the first place was through the competing world. And I saw that there was this opportunity to bring cannabis and other types of functional herbal components of plants to the fitness industry that was heavily supplements based on, okay, here's like your whey isolate, here's your creatine, here's your pre-workout. And I saw that there was this opportunity to shift the future of supplements, but also shift the narrative around cannabis. And so that's where the fusion of the two came. And at the time, there were companies like Flavor God and other like spice companies. One of the first products that we released were like, okay, how do we have individuals in the health and fitness industry adopt a new quote unquote supplement, which CBD is considered a supplement, but I guess you could just call it like new ingredient, new compound. How do we get the fitness industry to accept this? And then what is on the tail end of that exception is teaching them about everything around the cannabis plant and around functional mushrooms and other adaptogens and herbs. But we knew that through putting spice on a meal
Mm-hmm.
to make it taste better, to boost the flavor, we could also introduce people to this product. So that's where we started 4 years ago. And now we've evolved heavily into a functional supplement company. So we have all different types of supplements for all different components of living a healthy lifestyle. And it really came from a mission to, in the terms of the podcast, like redefine health, what health meant to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because for myself, before starting Cured, I was heavily in the bodybuilding world for like 4 years, competing myself. And I found the health and fitness industry after finding myself in a very, very, very dark place. And I've told this story many times, and I haven't told it on this podcast because this is the first time on the Loco Fit podcast, but I found myself on the edge of a bridge. I had climbed over a guardrail. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in 2012, April of 2012. I came out of a blackout on the other edge of a guardrail on a bridge, looking down at rocks, realizing that I was inches away from ending my life. And I was pulled back over the guardrail. That night led to several behaviors that really could have taken my life in itself as well. And then the next day, being in the hospital and hearing the doctor ask, so the doctor asked me, like, we're going to run some tests. We're obviously very concerned about you. Is there anything that we can find in your system? And my parents were there. And I listed off every drug that you could think of when it comes to the party world. And I saw the life crumble out of my parents. And I really was like, oh, wow, like I'm this far gone. I don't want to live anymore. I'm numbing myself. I'm trying to escape myself from the way that I was living. And that's when I was pulled out of Boulder, Colorado. I moved back home. I had to finish my last year of college commuting to Boulder, and was also at the time on the doorstep of my engineering career. I was studying to be an engineer, and I was really, inches away from losing it all. I was inches away from losing my life, but always also inches away from losing that career path because I was making stupid decisions that weren't going to allow me to really, take a degree, get a job, and do what I was trying to do. When my parents pulled me out of Boulder and I moved home, I cut literally everybody out of my life. So I had a friend group in Boulder, and they are not bad people. I made bad decisions by being around them. And came home, was extremely lonely. Instagram fitness world was like just beginning.
The time.
2012, 2013. And I saw people competing and I was like, what is this? Like, I've always been interested in health and fitness. I've played sports growing up. I've always liked to work out. I've always wanted to take my body and my life to its ultimate potential. When I saw people competing, I was like, this might be an avenue. And so bodybuilding really saved me in the beginning. Mm-hmm. It changed my life because it took my focus away from partying to, well, I don't have a lot of people around me. I need to finish college and I need to get this job and I need to change my life. And so fitness was that avenue. And I spent several years competing and met a lot of great people, yourself, several other people that still represent Cured, had several different podcasts. And then at one point, I remember taking a picture of myself and posting it on social media and being so shredded and hashtagging like health. And I was like, okay, like I'm saying that I'm healthy. I'm promoting this way of living on social media, but I wasn't healthy. Like I looked healthy. I had this image of like, wow, he's shredded and that's what we defined as healthy, but I wasn't healthy. And that's what really sparked the whole journey to really discover what really truly being healthy meant for me. And that sparked conversations around, oh, well, I've been sober for this long and and I use cannabis to calm my anxiety. I use cannabis to be creative. I use it while I'm hiking and exploring and finding myself in nature and really enjoying the present moment. And I was like, I think that that's a conversation that needs to be had, because it's a conversation similar to conversations around depression and around mental health struggles that people shy away from, and the world's never going to change if we don't have those conversations. So that's where CURED really came from, because it was this idea of creating a new picture of what health meant for me, but also what individuals would utilize in a health and fitness regimen when it came to supplements and things that we used. And that's where CBD came in, and that really sparked the whole journey of CURED. And as I said before this, like, we started off with certain products and it was very guerrilla marketing, and it's evolved to being a full-fledged, very diverse supplement company that's based on cannabinoids, functional mushrooms, and adaptogens, which is different than, if you look at other supplement companies.
Yeah, it's certainly different, and it goes back to like being rooted in like actual health, right?
Yeah.
Which is definitely a breath of fresh air amidst the fitness industry, because it's always funny, like people will see like that outside like physique, and I'm always trying to tell people like this is the least healthy somebody probably is, like, to be really honest, like just because they look like this, there are so many other things like physically and mentally that are happening, that somebody's really probably not at their peak, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I love about CURED, is that it is, for lack of a better word, functional, like with stuff, right? Like it's such like a bastardized word. Like I hate to almost say it. It's like when you say like holistic, you're like, well, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Or like functional, you're like, what does that mean? But in this context, they really are like functional products. And, just even the way that like the new products are evolving, like we have Euphoria, which I'm trying to think, like this will drop in a few weeks, the podcast, but this just came out. So there's just a lot of really great stuff that you guys are doing, and it's been cool to see the evolution of it. And I definitely think that there's much more of an understanding of cannabis in the industry now, right? And it's not just about just the fitness industry. Obviously, you guys have branched out just from that. I think there was definitely, I know there was a huge spike in CBD companies, right? Yeah. I mean, what year was that? Was that like
2018, 2019? Yeah. And
it was crazy.
It turned a lot of people off.
It's so sad, because now I feel like we almost need to like re-educate people on it, because it's almost like you're like, oh yeah, you work with a CBD company, you're like, no, like this is like actually legitimate, like all of our bodies have these systems, like these work for all of us. Like, this is the problem with what was happening, was that all those companies took off, was that they were really, really poor quality. So like you're getting
poor quality, extremely money hungry.
Yeah.
Like people made a lot of money in the first several years, but
it turned, unfortunately, a lot of people off who would benefit from using CBD. And it's not like a cure-all for everything, but it really is like, it's almost like an equalizer, like it balances a lot of things out, I feel like. Which is really nice, and in a very subtle way, which I think would be, in my opinion, more appealing to people. But oftentimes, if you don't feel something as much, people like shy away from it, because like you take pre-workout, like if it's working or it's not.
You feel it, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. So it's very easy to be like, oh, how did you like this? Versus like, when you try to explain to people like, oh, the importance of like vitamin D and fish oil, they're like, okay. You're like, no, these are like baseline things you should be taking. But they don't have that like that effect. Whereas like, obviously THC has that effect. So okay, this has a lot of THC in it, but that also has like some negative side effects, and that turns off a lot of people in its own right. So it's like CBD is kind of in this weird spot. But yeah, I do think that, unfortunately, that did turn a lot of people away.
It did. It definitely did. And
especially in the fitness industry.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like anybody who's fitness, I would say it also took off kind of in like the whole like grappling world, like type of thing. And which obviously makes sense, right? Because of like the nature of those types of, combative type sports. But again, if people are only being exposed to these like money hungry, poor quality companies, it's like people have this terrible taste in their mouth.
Yeah. And thankfully, like honestly, over 2020, there was a massive extinction event. So there are a lot of companies that came in the early years that no longer exist,
I
or
don't see them at all.
if they do exist, they're just like kind of there, but they didn't branch out. They didn't like since day one. I've like yes, like many people look at Cured Nutrition and like, oh, like that's a CBD company, and that's why I try to push like, hey, like we are a supplement company, but we're the future of supplements.
Mm-hmm.
Like the supplement company, we're not like a supplement company. We don't look like other supplement companies. Like you would list off a list of companies, and you're like, oh, well, like these aren't the same. And that for us has always been like what one of our core values is lead by example and be trailblazers. To be a trailblazer, there's no path. Like you create the trail. And so it's like we're walking through uncharted waters. We want to set an example by bringing high quality, innovative products to the market, but also educating around them in a way that's going to shape the future. And as a trailblazer, this path hasn't been walked before. So you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and you're going to potentially not have people fully understand what your long-term mission is by just looking at what you're doing today. But for us, it's always been around education and leading with quality, and being completely like trailblazers. Like this product does not exist. It's a completely new product. And, you know, who knows if this product will always look like this. We're going to continue to innovate, but that's how we work. That's been our entire mission, and the way that the company looks today is way like different than it looked 4 years ago, and the way that it looks in 4 years is going to be way different than it looks today. But it's all going to be grounded in what does it mean to truly live a healthy, happy, and fulfilled life, and it's through the products that we create, but also like our core ideology and values and system and way in which we all live personally.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that's why we've gotten along so well over the years, and I continue to love representing Cured for all of those reasons. And that's a really nice intro into our main topic today, which is mindfulness and meditation. And so I just finished reading this book called Dopamine Nation. Everybody stop what you're doing and go order it. It is incredible. I have become like super obsessed with learning about dopamine recently, and it just really is like once you learn about it, you can really reflect on so many ways that like it has influenced your life, like in a good and a bad way, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's just so you understand, okay, this is why am I like this? Probably dopamine. But so in this book, she quoted this about mindfulness, and I just really, really liked it because I think sometimes we hear that word and kind of like we said, like holistic or functional, like what does that mean? Like mindfulness can mean a lot of different things, and this is not certainly the only definition, but I think this was a nice working definition to make sense. So it's a chance for you to observe yourself as separate from your thoughts, emotions, and sensations, including pain. Another way of looking at it is the ability to observe what our brain is doing while we're doing it without judgment. So what I really took from that was that observing our patterns and thoughts without judgment, so that we can actually be decisive and create better outcomes versus simply just judging and then coping, usually with negative coping mechanisms, because that's typically what we all will fall into. Most people aren't going out of their way to cope positively, right? We just kind of degenerate into our more negative patterns. And those are different for everybody. But I just thought that was a really nice way of putting it that actually made sense. So it's like a tangible, not just like, yeah, you're like one with your body. Like you're actually able to like observe what you're doing and really detach from it without just that initial judgment. Yeah. Because I think we all have had thoughts or have done things that we look back and we're like, wow, like why did I think that? Like this is terrible. And sometimes it's not even that you really meant that. That was just kind of the thought that came to you, and it's like, well, what does this actually mean? Like let me actually detach from this and like what is this truly speaking to? So how has mindfulness in general shaped your life, business and personal? I know they're very similar because obviously when you own a business, a lot of your life is worked into the business, but how do you think that has changed?
Yeah, I had a friend that always said that entrepreneurship is a path for personal development. And so I really think that's true. I think as I become a better entrepreneur, I become a better person. And as I become a better person, I become a better entrepreneur. I think it's like a cycle. I think they feed off of each other. My journey, for me to start like thinking about mindfulness and where it started to show itself in my life, it really started back when I was, and it's evolved heavily, but it started back when I was seeing a therapist very frequently when I was extremely depressed. And the way in which I learned how to meditate, which I'm sure we'll talk about as a piece of mindfulness and meditation, but was sitting down in therapy and like sharing, oh, like this is what happened and this is what I thought, and I got in this argument with my girlfriend at the time, and I thought that she was doing this, and I made up this story in my head, and it was like, like Brene Brown says, like the story that I'm telling myself. That's like a line of hers. But my therapist started to teach me how to meditate without me actually realizing I was meditating. He said, when you feel really anxious, I need you to lay down flat on the floor, and I need you to just focus on breathing in and breathing out. You can have your eyes open, doesn't matter. And every time you start to see a thought come into your mind, I want you to just recognize that as a thought, let it go, and get back to focusing on breathing in and breathing out. And what I realized through that was what my mind tends to do. My mind was, it's kind of a dichotomy. My mind was full of thoughts. And to become mindful of your thoughts, you have to understand that you are the observer of your thoughts and you are not your thoughts. There's this book called The Untethered Soul, and that's how it starts off, is you are, I think I actually was talking to you the other day about Michael Singer, so I definitely recommend people looking into that book, but it starts off with saying that like you are not your thoughts, you are the observer of your thoughts. And if we think about it, much of the time, when negative situations come about, or we make poor decisions, or decisions that we regret, or find ourselves in arguments, or find ourselves in situations where there could have been a different outcome, a lot of the times it's because we were acting as if we were our thoughts, rather than recognizing, oh, I had a thought, and I can observe the thought, and I can understand if that thought is grounded in truth, or if it's just based on something that might not be real. It might be a story that I'm making up within myself or within my day-to-day actions, and then
oh my God, I'm so bad at that.
acting like you like have a thought, you think somebody thinks a certain way about you, then you're afraid to then talk to them. Like you make up a story in your head about what their thoughts of you are, and most of the time they're probably not true, but that's you acting out of your thoughts, not acting as an observer of the thought and creating a different reality. And that whole journey started for me based on learning how to meditate, not even knowing that I was learning how to meditate with my therapist, just laying on the ground and focusing on breathing and recognizing the patterns that I had within my head about the patterns of where my thoughts went. Like, oh my God, most of the time I was worried at the time when I was first learning how to do this I was worried about what I should have been doing. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I have this to-do list that's 50 million things long, and I was shooting on myself all the time. And for me, that's how it all started, but it wasn't until years later, actually, when I used to actually sit down to start to learn how to truly meditate, that I realized that my therapist taught me how to meditate years ago, but it was all grounded in mindfulness and understanding that you are the observer of your thoughts. You are not your thoughts.
Yeah, I think a lot of people listening would probably relate to that. Like there's always like the next thing, or there's, I should have done this, or I should be thinking this way, I should be acting that way. And I think that's why it is so hard to be very present and be mindful, because and I know for me, like I'm so guilty of this. Like I, always have the to-do list, always have a million things. And then what happens to me is that when I get in my head like that and I can't detach, then I just get very overwhelmed, and then you're super unproductive. At least I am. Like I'm so unproductive, because now all I'm doing is like wasting this mental energy thinking about all these things, when really I should just be like chipping away at this in a more like logical way. But it does become very, very overwhelming. And I think that if you find yourself in this place where you feel like, oh, there's no way I could ever be mindful of my thought because I'm so, stressed out or overwhelmed or whatever it is, finding ways to be able to detach, whether it is just, okay, let me sit down, I'm going to close my eyes, I'm going to do 5 deep breaths. And yeah, I do want to talk about meditation and some of your favorite practices, but I think that, again, for me, I'm super guilty of, like, if I'm doing something, like, I want to do it, like, the best. I want to be the best at this, and I want to do it, like, what's the best way I can do it? Or I just don't want to do it at all, right? Like, so if somebody's like, well, there's,
all or
like,
nothing.
this, of course, yeah, like, the worst, I'm so bad at that, but it's, like, with meditation, it's like, oh, I should be able to sit here for 20 minutes and, like, be able to have this, like, great session, or if I can't do that, then I'm not good at meditating. I'm not going to do this. Whereas, in reality, most of the benefits are stemming from, like, you have these thoughts and you're able to just kind of come back to this place. And I mean, it's really hard, especially for people who have that kind of proclivity to be thinking like that all the time. But just being able to kind of come back, even if it's just twice in like 5 minutes, or even if it is just like, let me do like 10 deep breaths. Like people really underestimate like the power of just like really simple breath work, not anything like there's super fancy breath work that you can get into, but just like basic, like let me do some like deep belly breaths, like 10 of them right here. Like that is so powerful if you're able to just like do that, and then you're like, oh, okay. And for me, I've talked about it a little bit on here.
And I think that a lot of people write that off. Yeah. I think that a lot of people hear because that and they're like,
it's not hard enough. It's
they're
not
like, oh,
anything.
that's just like whatever. Like, but no, like actually like doing that and actually trying it, it's a practice. Like it's a practice. It's not like, I don't think it's like, it's a skill set that you're continuing to develop, but it's a skill set based on understanding. It's all based on understanding of yourself. Like we were talking about this last night, and I was mentioning the time, how my leadership has evolved, and how I used to be somebody that if something went wrong, I would just burn the world down that day. And I would have days where I would wake up and without any clear reason would already be in a bad mood, would already be showing up in a very negative energetic state, or whatever it may be, without checking in with myself and recognizing where it may have come from. You find yourself creating situations that you probably could have avoided if you could have just checked in with yourself and understood, oh, like I'm thinking about this. I have a bunch of anxiety about the fact that, we just invested a bunch of money in this product and I'm a little bit worried about X and X happening. And I'm not frustrated that my baby is crying. I'm nervous about what's happening with my business right now, but it can come out sideways because I didn't check in to actually understand that I had anxiety about this situation. All I could do was react to what was in front of me and the way that I was behaving based off of a thought that I had that created an emotion. And it takes time. You have to stop and you have to detach and truly become the observer to go down a different path.
Yeah, and I think it is action-based. So a lot of times when people talk about this stuff, it's like, oh, okay, well, if you're really anxious and stressed out, like, just don't do anything. It's like, well, that's not useful for a lot of people either, right? And then, like, that's not, like, a long-term solution. So what you're saying, which is, like, so important, is, like, something is spiking some type of negative emotion. You need to address it, but you're addressing it by actually observing it and then making a change in your behavior. You're not just saying, oh, I'm anxious today, and I'm just going to let my behaviors write them off because I'm anxious.
Yeah.
That's really easy to do. And obviously there's going to be days where we all do that, but if you can work on this in a way to be able to say, okay, let me detach, let me take a few deep breaths, let me go for a walk. I've been talking about like short walks so much lately, but like honestly, they've been such like a change for me. And not that I didn't walk before, it's not like I wasn't walking before, but just like the small adjustment of like, let me like really make sure that I'm getting this in several times a day.
And I think we talked about this on our hike the other day, but doing it in a way where we're not distracting with music or a podcast. Like you literally just like throw it all away and like go walk.
Yes.
And like not have any other stimulation besides I feel the ground underneath my feet. I feel the sun. Oh, I'm thinking about this. Okay, let me just understand that I'm thinking about this. Throw that away. One of the big things in meditation and through one of the apps that I use is this image of a cloudy sky. And like, we look outside right now, it's cloudy out right now, but on the other side of those clouds, the blue sky's there. the blue sky is actually always there, and we can always find ourselves in that state of mind to think about, traffic, or think about if we just stayed with the clouds, for example, in a storm. The blue sky is always on the other side of that. We just have to remember that. We have to understand that we are being clouded. Our day-to-day actions are being clouded by some type of a storm, but the blue sky is on the other side of that. And we just have to get to that understanding that it's all going to be there. There's just something clouding our vision or our thoughts right now.
And the technologies are certainly clouding them even more. So this really great book, Digital Minimalism, I've talked about it again a bunch of times on here, but he talks about it like we're going through a period of like we don't have any solitude deprivation. Like we literally, like that's what we're always in. Like we're always either like I'm listening to a podcast, I'm listening to an audiobook, I'm on the phone, I have music on, and none of these things are like bad things, right? It's not like you're just like scrolling mindlessly like, hey, I'm listening to a podcast, I'm listening to something educational. But it's like, is there any time where you're just like having thoughts? And sometimes when I turn all that off, I honestly have nothing going on, which is sometimes nice also, right?
Which is
it's
incredible.
Like, oh, okay, there's nothing going on right now. And I'm like, that's cool. And then there's other times where it's like, I mean, so many things are happening, right? Obviously, if you're walking somewhere by yourself, I would say bring your phone just so you have that. That's just a little disclaimer.
Yeah.
But you don't need to have headphones. You don't need to be doing something. And I think, for me, being somebody who's always like, there's all these things I got to do. Sometimes you can feel guilty, right? Like, oh, I'm taking these like 10 or 20 minutes. Like I could get on a phone call. I could do this. And sometimes it is nice. Like, hey, I'm going to get on a walk and get on a phone call. Like that's a nice way to like pair things. But it is important to be able to have that time to yourself, even if it is 5 minutes where you literally are not putting anything in and you're just observing and letting whatever come to the surface. Because sometimes you'll be really surprised. You're like, wow, like, and I notice like now that I'm more introspective with all this, like I go through periods where I'll notice myself putting on music more so that it's not silent. And it doesn't have to even be like, it can be just like classical music. It doesn't have to be like music that I would sing along to. It's just noise. And I'm like, oh, this is because I don't want to be silent with my thoughts. Like I'm just hearing this. Yeah.
That's the biggest thing is we are very uncomfortable with ourselves in our true core essence. Like a lot of the time we don't truly understand how many people do you ask, like, who are you? Do you truly deeply know who you are? And get an answer where the person says, this is exactly who I am. Like, I can't say that I'm fully there. I think that we're all on this path of trying to figure out who we really are. But how do you figure out who you really are without being able to sit with yourself in silence and try to understand? Like that's been crucial for me. It's been crucial for me to understand how my thoughts operate on a day-to-day basis, to understand who I am, what drives my motivation on a day-to-day basis, because by doing so, I start to understand more so than what I value, what I don't want in my life. I think to understand what you truly value and really understand who you really are, you have to first understand what you aren't and what you don't want, and what drives you to have days of high anxiety or frustrating situations like that. That's crucial to understand who we are. A lot of times, like we've been through exercises here at CURED to understand like who are you and what do you value, and how based on those values do you bring certain attributes to the team. And asking a question around what do you value can be a very difficult question to ask for so many people. And I always recommend that the way to understand what you value is to first understand what you don't want in your life and understand what you don't value. But the only way to do that is to be able to truly sit and have conversation with yourself, like not like verbal, but like sit and like be contemplative. And like that's what you're doing with those walks, is you're on a contemplative walk around what the fuck is going on in this world, and who am I, and how am I going to show up, and how am I going to live my fullest, truest potential based on learning who I am.
And I think it's a really important point that you mentioned. You have to understand what you don't want. And I think going through those experiences is very important. And you have to recognize like that dark side, essentially, right? You have to be able
100%.
to recognize that you can be a very bad person. We all are. We all have that capability, and not necessarily bad person in the way that like most people like, oh, you know, killing someone, breaking the law, like it's not like that, but like we have these tendencies that, you know, really are our dark side, that if you don't understand that, you're always going to find yourself playing that out, whether you want to or not. And then what ends up happening is when people are in that situation, they won't recognize it and they'll just try to cope, right? Going back to that kind of negative coping mechanism. And that's just what I see is like when you're not able to be mindful, we just start pushing things away. Like, okay, I'll just push it. And it was this small thing. And then it grew into like this huge issue.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, now what do I do?
Yeah.
Right? And but sometimes you have to go through that to be like, okay, this is what I know not to do all of these things before.
I think you have to.
Yeah.
I like, you know, so I've asked the question to other people, like, do you think you need to reach rock bottom to change your life? I don't think you have to reach rock bottom to change your life. I think you just have to understand what you don't want. And by understanding your behaviors, you can figure out what you want, like what you don't want and what you want. But at the end of the day, like the only way that your life is going to change is not based on external influence. Like it's an internal game. And for me, what I realized and what's been really, really transformative, especially within leadership and business, is recognizing who I was and how I was extremely controlling. That I learned that through relationship with my wife. When we first started dating, I was so controlling. I tried to control every situation. I tried to control who we were around, what conversations she was having with what people, and how I could feel protected by controlling the situation. By, like, my insecurities came out as control. I didn't want certain situations to come up because what if she found this guy more attractive? Or what if, you know, there was a better path for her? So what I did was I tried to control everything, and it became very manipulative. But the way that also shows up and can show up in business is literally you can't build something bigger than yourself if you operate in that way. You literally can't, because you try to control everything. And so the way that I was showing up in relationship and the way that we found ourselves in a very rocky situation towards the beginning of our relationship, initially I was projecting everything outwards onto her, but what it came down to was I was so controlling, and a form of it was like codependency, in that, like, if I could do everything that I could possibly do to make her happy, look at what I did here, look at what I did there, like, what about this? It was a control mechanism to make myself feel safe and to make myself feel loved. And the same thing would happen in business. I was saying this last night at dinner, I thought that if I didn't have all the answers, if I wasn't always right, well, how could I be the leader? How could I be the one that people trust? How could I be the one that was supposed to be building and casting the vision for where the business was going?
For sure. And that's why a lot of people don't make it past either like a small business, or even if it is just you and you want to expand. Obviously it's going to depend on each business, or you have a large business, but eventually you just bring it down because you can't let go of that. And it really is obviously an ego thing, and you think that you can or should be, maybe you can't do it better right now, but I should be able to do this, like I don't need anybody else, like I got it, which obviously is really useful in certain situations to be very independent and very, like, you know, driven and all that, but it does have its own kind of dark side when you can't say, okay, what am I not good at, especially in business, like what am I not good at? What am I good at? Okay, that's number one. Let's really like push these things. And then in business, what's great is that you can build a team that pulls up that slack, because there's certain things that no matter how much I want to be good at them, even if I did, I'm probably not. And it's like, why would I waste my time when I could be doing something that I'm going to be better at, right? Like I'm going to be able to share more, give more if I'm doing this, and then have the team be built up to where they're able to contribute their best strengths. And obviously everybody still has to work on their weaknesses. You can't just be like, oh, I'm not good at this, I'm never going to do it. But understanding, okay, how to build that team and to like build the people around you. And then also in a relationship, I mean, it does, like in any kind of interpersonal relationship, I think recognizing, okay, what are my like strong suits? What are some negative things? And then, being open about that, especially in a like, primary attachment relationship. Really being open with that other person and saying, this is what I, have a tendency to do. I'm trying to work on it. Like, you need to help keep me in check, or whatever, and have like a very like give and take type of relationship there. Because otherwise, yeah, those negative things will always come out in different ways. And sometimes like they look good, right? Because you're like, oh, look at what I did. Like I did all this great stuff, and like, and that's not necessarily bad, but the reason that it was happening was maybe not for the best reason, right?
Yeah.
And
and literally all of for me developing this awareness around myself all came from and doing the introspection all came from mindfulness practice and sitting down and practicing meditation, because without the ability to drop the noise and the outside stimulation, you can't figure out who you are.
No, and you have to go through that period. So whatever it is that you feel like is the hardest thing for you to detach from, like whether it is like the devices or always listening to something or always like never feeling like you have time on your own. Obviously we a lot of people listening have kids. Try to find that quiet time, 5-10 minutes, like in the morning or at night.
Yeah.
Device free, distraction free. So let's get into some of those meditation practices.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
I'm certainly no expert. I like at all. It took me 3 times to get through the introductory course on waking up. So Sam Harris's Waking Up app, they have an intro course, and because again I'm psycho, I would start it, and then if I wouldn't go through with it, I would say, okay, well I need to go back from the beginning. I can't just like. I didn't want to take like a few month like sabbatical and then come back.
It's good discipline.
That's how I am as a person. So
I don't think that's bad.
I was like, all right. So I restarted. I think by the 3rd time that I ended up doing it, like in a year or plus, I finished the intro. So it's like a 30-day intro. And then I'll be honest, I haven't been on it daily. I go through periods where I do it more than others. But I really like that app just because there's a 10 or a 20-minute option. It changes every day, like once you get past that introductory course. And then there's also other resources on there too about just kind of like mindfulness and all these other just really great conversations that they have. So it's really like a resource, not just a meditation app, which is why you do pay for it. I also found that for me, paying for it certainly makes it more, it makes me want to do it more, right? Because if it's free, it's like, oh, whatever. Doesn't matter if I don't use it, right? And so whether that's like good or bad.
I mean, I think that's how a lot of things work
in life. Me
accountable.
Like,
yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I use an app too. I use the Headspace app, and I've been using that app for I started meditating. So I shared how I learned how to meditate, but then I started meditating consistently, utilizing a tool, an app. It's been about like 6 years ago. And if I looked at my phone, like right now in the Headspace app, it says I've meditated like 7,000 something minutes or something like that, which like over the course of time it's really not a lot when you look at it broken down. But in total, I've probably meditated close to like 10,000 minutes in my life or like something like that over the last 6 years, which sounds like a lot, but as a daily practice for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, it's really, if you can't give yourself that amount of time, you probably can't ever change your life.
No.
To be completely honest. What I love about the Headspace app, I think people look at the concept of meditation and they just think it's like so overwhelming. They're like,
I used to.
Like, yeah, and like how even like, what you're saying, like, I'm going to do it wrong. Like that's probably like the first like failure of meditation is like doing it wrong, because there's no right or wrong way to do it. And even in my meditation this morning, within the Headspace app, the founder, Andy, who is the voice that brings you through a lot of the meditations, he goes, it's not about the time, it's about the depth. And it's about the ability to come into yourself and be fully present in the moment and see where your mind can go, or see where it doesn't go. Just like you're saying, like a lot of the times you'll get into a meditation and you won't have any distractions and your mind doesn't go anywhere. And you're like, wow, this is peaceful without your mind going anywhere. And that's the whole point, is you don't need to be going anywhere. And
sometimes what I find is that like there'll be, I've been doing things for a few hours and I'm like, let me like meditate, right? Let me just go for a walk and put this on. And things that I wasn't even thinking that I was thinking about, like as soon as I sit down and turn that on, and it just like, it all floods forward. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is a lot. This is very overwhelming. But this is bringing up stuff that clearly I was not even allowing myself to observe, because I was just like, again, pushing down. That's just like, that's what I do. So, all right, this maybe isn't the best meditation, but this was brought up, and now I'm able to actually like recognize this. Let me think about this, and expand on it, and actually probably work through this, because if it continues to come up, like if you're not thinking about it all day, then you just sit down, and the first thing when you're allowed to just sit and think, or I guess not think, or just observe, that's all that's flooding into your mind. You're like, wow, okay, this is alarming. Like this needs to be addressed, because I can only push this back so much.
Yeah, it becomes like, we've all heard the term seed of resentment, but that's true for any situation that turns into something much bigger than it could have been if we would have addressed it sooner. Oh
yeah, it's the proverbial like tiny monster, right? And then it becomes like this huge thing that you don't have to deal with, like, oh, this little thing, it's fine, it's nothing.
And we're stuck in this world of per Anna Lemke's book, like Dopamine Nation. We are in this world. We're in this world that's so stimulating and so it's full of abilities to distract. Like it's very easy to distract. It's very easy to feel. It's very easy to not fill a void, but numb a fill a void, but also numb a feeling. Like if you feel a certain way, you just had a negative situation come up, it's very easy to reach to your phone and look at Instagram and try to fill yourself up with something else. And it's essentially, she didn't use this word, this is like my take on it. It's like cheap dopamine, right? Like when you're going to these things that are like highly addictive and like very like quick, fast, they have a high peak, but they're not very sustained, whether it is social media, video games, porn, gambling, all these types of things that people get so addicted to, food, it all has the same response, right? And they all are increasing our baseline levels of dopamine. But at some point, the like pain pleasure axis gets tilted towards like we were seeking pleasure, but now we're just feeling pain. And sometimes that actually manifests into physical pain, which is really interesting, even though it's like more like a cognitive thing that we're dealing with. So it's very, very interesting. Like I would highly recommend the book. She's a psychiatrist out of Stanford, but she uses a lot of psychotherapy in her practice. So it's not just, she has a really good perspective, and she works a lot with addiction and all different types of addictions, not just what people think of, when you hear the word addict, nobody would normally say like, oh, I'm a social media addict, or I'm a online shopping addict, or I'm a, whatever. Most people think, oh yeah, this person does heroin, or they drink a bottle of, whiskey every day. Like those are obviously typical addictions that we all know about, which are also really, really, not great, right? But this is just different. And the problem is this is so pervasive. And I've now been off social media for 2 weeks, or man, has it been, no, this will be 2 weeks, like in the middle of this week. So about like maybe like 10 days. And initially, like I was just at a breaking point with a lot of things that I was like, I physically can't do this right now, because I find myself so compulsively on it. Not even that you want to be, you're just kind of, it's just again an easy way to distract and numb. So the first day when I deleted the app, I found myself literally, it might have been like 40 times like that day. Like it was like so much. If the phone was near me,
I would pick it up, I would open it, and I would scroll to where, like the Instagram app would be like on my back page, and I would go to click on it, and I had no reason to go search for it. Obviously, there were certain times I was like, oh, I need to go look at that, because there's so many things that are on Instagram to search, and I was like, oh, okay, I can't do that. But there were so many times where literally I had no reason, and I would just grab it, and I was like, well, this is concerning. And then the second day, it was there, but much less. And then what I just started to notice was that I would go for it a little bit less compulsively, but more so if I had like a down period, right, of a few minutes. So nothing, crazy, but like, oh, you're waiting in line for something, or you're like, oh, I have a few minutes between a call, let me look at this, or I am feeling a negative emotion and I don't want to sit with this right now, let me grab this. So it was so interesting, and that's just one. I don't really use any other platforms. I mean, we post on different platforms, but I'm not going and like obsessively checking things by any means. And it's not even that I'm obsessively checking my Instagram. It's just like you just click on it and there's always something. And you find yourself, you're like, I don't even want to be looking at this. But so it's a very hard spot to be in, because the benefits are so vast for people who are educators, right? For what we do, it is so valuable.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much bad information out there, that hopefully our team can be a small sliver of like positive information that allows people to like understand different things and like be introspective and all that. So it's like, I know the work that we're doing is useful. So I don't even feel like what I'm doing is not useful on there, but it's the other things that come with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, in order to have a successful account, they really reward that type of behavior. They reward you posting all the time. They reward you engaging all the time. If I just made a post and never went on there, they don't reward that. So it's very, very interesting, and I feel this pull like constantly. But it was interesting. I was really more so, I knew I wasn't really going to miss it per se. Like there's a few, like, if anybody follows the Gains, you guys, if you know, it's like the best meme account on Instagram. So people have been like sending me like funny ones. But like besides that, like there's been nothing really that I'm like, oh my God, I'm like dying to know what's going on here. Like everything's been crazy. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not involved. Like this is so great. But I do understand, okay, there is a big purpose of why we are on here. It's just interesting how it just kind of modulates your behavior, even if you don't want it. And that really is a mark of addiction. I'm not saying I'm addicted to social media, but the mark of addiction is you are not choosing to engage in the behavior or the substance because it brings you pleasure. You're trying to avoid the pain that is subsequent from not having it. So it was interesting to note, okay, wow, I'm picking this up when I have this downtime, or I don't want to sit with this negative thought, or something has come up and I just want to distract myself. So, we all say things like, oh, I don't have time to meditate. And I'm so guilty of saying that I don't have time to do this. But really, we do have time. There's other things that we are putting in the way of that time. And I would encourage, and if anybody like watches a TV show or, has any type of social media account, and I'm not saying you can't have social media and you can't watch TV, but taking 10 to 20 minutes to do something for yourself, whether it's a walk and a meditation, is going to make you improve in so many areas that you might find that you maybe don't even need those other things as much as you thought you did.
I personally cannot live my healthiest life without meditation. When I find myself slipping on my meditation practice, I typically can recognize. So typically what happens is I will start showing up differently on a day-to-day basis. I won't be grounded. I won't have the ability to feel like I have resilience in difficult situations, and then I start to look backwards and start to analyze what I stopped doing. And a lot of the times, it's gaps in my meditation practice. I stopped meditating 30 days ago, or I've been meditating very sparsely, and now I'm showing up as this person. And it's the same thing that we started this conversation with like, taking fish oil, vitamin D, CBD supplements, whatever it is, starting a new nutrition approach, you don't recognize that you're not going to see the change in the day. You're not going to see the change in the week. You may start seeing a little bit of changes after several weeks, but it takes time to actually see behaviors manifest in a positive or negative way in your life. And for me, if I am in a place where I have gaps in my meditation practice, I always start to see the detriments of it like 30 days afterwards.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like I couldn't live my life and understand the way in which I am searching for the Instagram app on my phone, or the way in which I'm checking my fucking bank account, or I am like whatever it may be that I'm trying to fill myself up with. I wouldn't be able to change those behaviors in my life without mindfulness and meditation, because through mindfulness and meditation you create awareness, and through awareness you can actually start to change your life. But if you don't have awareness, you can't change.
I mean, I think that's the perfect place to end that. I mean, bam.
There
If there was ever a way to end a podcast on why you should be mindful and why you should meditate, I think that was perfect. So you said you use the Headspace app?
I use Headspace app. I have used Waking Up, but I have found that Headspace is one that I connect with the most, but I wouldn't say that there's one better than the
I just
other.
want to give people some resources so they have options, because I know a lot of people like, well, where do I start? What should I look up? So there's so many, but yeah, Headspace, Waking Up.
Insight Timer, a lot of people use.
Yeah, and even if you want to just, like we said, just starting with something as simple as sitting down, whether it's in a chair or it's lying down, whatever is more comfortable, obviously based on where you're at, and just eyes open or eyes closed, taking 5 to 10 like very deep belly breaths. If you don't know how to do a diaphragmatic breath, just Google how to do that. There's like easy YouTube videos. It's not like rising your chest very rapidly. It's a very specific type of breath. Do that 5 to 10 times, and then maybe do that once or twice a day, and just start there. And hold yourself accountable, right? I think the apps can be good in that way, because you can say, okay, I have something to look forward to, whereas maybe a practice on your own would be harder. But kind of like anything, schedule it in, say, okay, I'm going to do it this time, set a reminder, something like that, and then just start. And for me, like I said, one of the biggest ways it's been impactful, just to be more mindful, not necessarily to meditate, but is to have those periods of solitude from all other inputs, right? Not talking, not listening, not learning, not entertaining, just being with my own thoughts. And that can be as simple as something like, hey, when you're getting ready in the morning, maybe you always want to listen, and that's a great time to like listen to something new. Or when you're, getting, maybe even not in the morning, right? Because a lot of people are cognitively ready in the morning to listen to something, but maybe like at night, right? Or like if you're cooking dinner, maybe just have it quiet, don't necessarily have any inputs. I think you'd be really surprised at like what you actually hear, when you are quiet. So thank you so much. This was really fun.
Thank you.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I was very, very excited to do this. I'm so glad that it worked out. And if you guys are interested in learning more about CURED and the CURED products, you can visit curednutrition.com. The new product that we talked about is Euphoria. Very excited about this. It is amazing. We have some new flavors coming out in the next few months as well. So that'll be very exciting. And for all other inquiries or to apply for coaching, you can visit teamlocofit.com. And we will catch you guys next week.
Thank you.